I think there was a clear lack of preparation and execution here on Walz's part.
I think actually it's the opposite. I think he had too much preparation.
Maybe, yeah.
He had so many lines that he was clearly trying to say that he didn't listen and said when J.D. Vance said one of the many things he really hit Kamala Harris on, not Tim Walz, but Kamala Harris, he didn't respond because he clearly had things in his mind. I think the lack of interviews that he has done with national media, with local media, it showed. He needed more reps.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, J.D. Vance is much more experienced at this, at public speaking, at defending himself, at pivoting.
A cordial debate between these two men. I wouldn't describe them as evenly matched because they are so different. So different in style and so different on substance. Very interested to hear from the spin room, to hear from all of my colleagues here, to get to all of the analysis that we're going to get to. I think the big picture takeaway from this is that one of these candidates is much slicker than the other, is a much more practiced, kind of professional debate style speaker, and the other candidate won. There was one bad moment for Tim Walz in this debate where he got mixed up and embarrassed in answering a question about exactly what month he had been in China in relation to the Tiananmen Square protest. But then on guns, on January 6th, on Obamacare, on the economy, on blaming everything on the border, back again on healthcare, on abortion, on every issue on substance, J.D. Vance was very polished and very slick, and Tim Walz beat him on all the substantive points. At least that was my take on it.
She says, J.D. Vance was really slick. He was slick. Okay, when you use that, when you're describing anyone, okay, that's a pejorative, all right? And the only person in U.S. politics that actually fits that description, you know, slick, is Gavin Newsom, okay? J.D. Vance wasn't slick. It's called being polished. It's called doing your homework. It's called being ready. That's all he was. He was ready. Why? Because he constantly threw himself in the lion's den, doing one-on-ones with Dana Bash, who you know is going to vote for Kamala. He's put himself in the most, you know, completely hostile territory, and he comes out polished. Why? The reason you do that is because you know the issues. Okay? Once the real giant comes, if you haven't already been out there, it's gonna show. Do you know why King David was willing to stare down that giant? You know, David and Goliath. Do you know why he was willing to stare him down and say, "How dare you?" Because he had already been wrestling, protecting his flock from the bears and the lions. He had already seen this. So once the big stage got there, he was ready. It's like, hey man, God is already protecting me against the lions. He's already protecting me against the bears. You're nothing. You are going to be, we're going to make bread out of you. And that's what you just saw happen.
Like muting powers. And I actually think if you're a woman, that might be the worst moment J.D. Vance had, because he was going to mansplain right over that mute button. He was, and again, I don't pretend to know how everyone will react to this. I think that a lot of women in positions of authority that should command respect just by virtue of that dynamic will see themselves in some dude that disrespected them and talked over. You know, I mean, there was a moment like that with the vice presidential in the Harris-Pence debate.
So what you're supposed to believe, all of these, you know, leftists, tell you that no, a woman is the same. The woman can do. They immediately revert to, but I'm a woman. It's like, what the heck does that have to do with anything? The moderators are females. So what? They can either do the job or they can't. Don't revert back to your, clutching your pearls. And now he's mansplaining. Is that why they had the two women out there? To kind of make sure that JD Vance didn't say what's what? That stuff is kind of amazing to me. Like somehow now, because there are women, you can't tell the truth.
Democratic strategist in a battleground state was actually very critical of Walz's performance tonight, telling us Vance is much better at this than Walz. I don't think it matters much, and there's good moments for both sides. But if I have a frustration, is that I don't know what Walz's strategy was tonight. He said his advice to him would have been, you have one job. Goad Trump into debating the VP again. Let it rip.
I've interviewed you more this week than I've interviewed the entire Democratic ticket this year, but that's a separate issue.
Okay, but the Democratic ticket has not been the Democratic ticket for very long.
The excuses and spinning, obfuscation, this, oh, no, you don't understand. He was, I think he was, underprepared and no, I think he was overprepared. And it's like, these are all excuses. Did you get the job done? Were you able to do your job? I don't give a crap why you couldn't do it. You didn't get it done. And let's just face it. Okay, Tim Walz is not presidential timber. I don't know how you look at Tim Walz and think he's presidential material. The same thing goes for Kamala. They are not presidential. They do not reach the bar. You see, when Donald Trump walks into an office, when he walks into a room, he commands attention. He's not begging you to look at him like Joe Biden was. The second he walks in the room, it's his. To do with whatever he wants to do. That's what you want from a president. Does Tim Walz look any remotely close to that?
So all
three of them. So make it all three.
Look, I felt that if you're sitting at home and you were watching and you were not fact checking and you weren't familiar with what JD Vance had said previously or what Donald Trump stood for, he seemed at many moments to be reasonable.
Yeah.
In other words, if you're ignorant and if you haven't been listening to our propaganda, you may come away thinking that, wow, that JD Vance seems to be a nice guy. See, you haven't availed yourself to our style of propaganda. And once you get indoctrinated by the NSNBC, crapalola, then you'll understand why, no, it was actually Tim Walz who won.
And that was clearly a change in tone. And I know you all were talking about the strategic shift there. That was interesting to watch. Watching Tim Walz, what I thought about was when he emerged onto the scene, we all probably interviewed him 5 times during Veep Stakes. He propelled himself single-handedly into Veep Stakes, right? He became the running mate because of their chemistry, but also because he was so effective at connecting people authentically and organically.
Yeah. Perhaps he did do an interview with you, Jen. Or maybe even with Rachel. Or with Joy, or with any of you other sycophants from the Democratic Party. Maybe he did. Maybe he did hundreds of interviews with you people. None of them were adversarial. You see, JD Vance did adversarial interviews. People that he knew don't like him, don't want him to win, and would do anything in their power to trip him up. So that means you have to know what you know. Yeah, Jen, if all he does is show up to your show and he never, why not call in Joe Rogan? Why not Tucker Carlson? Why don't you go on Candace Owens' show? Because he can't do real interviews
on television. He's been absent. I think that's a huge mistake to hold him back and not put him out there.
Meaning he hasn't been on the media.
He hasn't been out in the media for a while. He's been absent. I do think that's a missed opportunity. But tonight, I felt like he was spending a lot of time in the first half or 2/3 proving he read the briefing materials.
It kind of reminded me of the June 27th debate when Kamala Harris that night said of Joe Biden, it was a slow start but a strong finish. And that's how I felt that Tim Walz kind of did tonight. You know, to use Tim Walz's own words, I mean, a lot about this debate tonight was weird. There were uncomfortable, cringy moments. But overall, I think my takeaway was something that Reince Priebus said on the outset, which was that J.D. Vance needed to come away as that humble, likable guy from Hillbilly Elegy. It seemed like he did perhaps get some points in that area.
In other words, J.D. Vance won, but they can't admit it. They can't admit that this is just a nice guy. They can't admit that this is an articulate guy. They can't admit for the fact that, because have you noticed? No one has talked about his wife. Have you noticed? Shouldn't J.D. Vance be called a white supremacist? I mean, after all, why do you think Donald Trump chose him? It's because he's a white supremacist. Does anyone find that just a little bit odd? Why don't they attack him on racial issues? You see, you can't say that. Because if you do, you got to acknowledge he's married to a woman of color. And since Trump is such, see, that's why they can't bring it up. If Trump is such a racist, why would he pick a person who is married to a woman of color? These people are disingenuous. They are liars. And J.D. Vance just showed them up. The one thing that I take away is that now you can see why Donald Trump chose J.D. Vance, a guy that came from nowhere, paired with a guy that had everything. You see how that works? J.D. Vance makes me proud to be a Republican, actually. I'm not kidding. He makes me proud to be a Republican. Like I can look at that guy and say, well, you know, we're not the best, but at least we got people like J.D. Vance. You know, at least he ain't Mitch McConnell. Good God. All right, guys, that's it for now. If you like this video, smash that like button and subscribe. And if you're following me on Rumble, please press that follow button. And until the next time, God bless.